Well, it's Monday, February 2nd, 2026, and I'd like to introduce you to an extraordinary woman. Sherri Divband is an author of books for children and the founder of Aramis Creative Learning Center, which offers project-based learning. She advocates engagement with animals and teaches holistic healing. She also works with children who possess extraordinary psionic abilities. Sherri, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here with you today.
You've been working in the Aramis Creative Learning Center for some time, and it started out as an online learning center, and now you're transitioning?
We are. Well, the entire time it actually was supposed to be a physical center. I tried to launch it in Maryland where I lived at the time, and it was the worst timing ever for a lot of reasons, one of which COVID. And so I had a beautiful wellness center in Bethesda, Maryland, and I was going to transition and turn that into kind of a learning center for children while we looked for property to expand. And we couldn't meet in person, and then we had the whole mask issue, and I was against the masks, and the parents wanted the masks. There was a lot of bureaucracy around all of that. And so we transitioned to a virtual only. And at that time, I was doing a lot of podcasts, and I had interest from families all over the world that wanted to take the classes anyways. So it seemed I had more people interested out of state than in state at that time. So I was like, well, I'll just do a virtual kind of learning platform. But the idea has always been to have a physical center, if not one in every state and internationally renowned for education. So Aramis is a movement. It's not even one school. It's actually part of a movement of the trajectory of children's education in the future.
Would you say that your mission here on Terra is to work with children?
I would absolutely say that. Now, if you asked me that question many years ago, I would have told you absolutely not, because I did go through somewhat of a traumatic childhood. And so I was an only child and lots of things happened to me. So I became very close with a childhood dog, and I was very connected to the animal kingdom. And I made a promise to myself that I was going to stay far away from humans as possible. And I didn't fit here, didn't belong here, didn't want anything to do with people. And I was bullied a lot. So I didn't like children. I didn't like other kids. And the animals were the only beings that showed me unconditional love. And so I actually went into the veterinary field for over 20 years. I was a registered nurse within the veterinary field. And I worked with animals, and that was going to be my career choice. I was going to work with animals and hide from humanity and not talk to people. So if you had asked me back then, or told me, hey, Sherri, do you know that in 20 plus years you're going to be working with adults and children and all of this? I would have been like, no way. So it was definitely a path that led me here, was kind of a divine, I feel like it was divinely led. Otherwise, there would have been resistance, I think, on my part, had I known about it ahead of time, if that makes sense.
What do you think the relationship is between healthy human beings and animals?
I think there's a symbiosis there. Animals, for one thing, the density of consciousness that they hold and their frequency is extraordinarily much higher than humans. And they resonate mostly within the fifth dimension and higher. It's the humans that are born into the third dimension and have third dimensional bodies that have dis-ease, developed disharmony through traumas and programming and various 3D interference is kind of what I've coined it in my books. And we fluctuate, we oscillate in frequency. And our capability of holding a higher density of consciousness is highly dependent on inherited and ancestral traumas, epigenetics, quantum entanglement, and like I said, trauma from childhood. So we are these beautiful blank canvases, so to speak, with unconditional love, but then we can change. Animals don't. So the more healthy a human is, the higher vibration we are, and the higher density of consciousness we can hold. Therefore, the closer we can connect with animals in a more profound way than most of humanity, who is riddled with disease, traumas, and in a low vibrational state that often even look at animals as less than us. And so there is a hierarchy and egocentric structure that the humans have evolved into for various reasons. But for children, especially me as a child, I was so wounded that I looked at animals with such a pure heart, and I think they felt that back. And so it had nothing to do with health for me. It was more about the vibratory frequency that I was holding and the connection that we had. But to answer your question, yes, health and lack of disease and the frequency that we hold as adults is highly dependent on our authentic connection to animals.
I notice you have some elephants in the background there.
I became obsessed with elephants in middle school. At the time, I didn't realize. I know now that elephants are my spirit animal, and I hold the divine matriarch energy, divine feminine matriarchal energy, and that's why I work with children and kind of what I'm here to do. And everything that characterizes a female matriarch elephant is me. And so I was embodying and being trained by the elephant spirits of the elephants since I was in middle school, going into that preteen age, had without even realizing it. So they are my guardians.
I've always felt a really strong empathy for whales and elephants, and I'll see video of whales getting hunted and elephants being hurt, by poachers and things like that, and it just hurts me so much because I feel like they're such beautiful beings.
They absolutely are. And I have 5 adult books as well. And in my most recent book, it's called Healing the Human Animal Bond. And it was a book that I dedicated to the animal kingdom kind of as a thank you, like a full circle moment. I wanted to circle back as I've written all these books and I talk about children and all of these things, but I wanted to go back and thank the animals for what they did for me and how I believe they saved my life. And in that process, I learned and I wrote about in that book how elephants are guardians of the land and whales are guardians of the sea. And they're one of several, and that's why they're so powerful, and that's why they are sought after by the dark ones, and poached and killed because of their wisdom and their divine guardianship of this planet.
Would you say that your education project, the Aramis Learning Center, is going to include specific hands-on animal connection for children?
So we have 3 pillars in the vision that I'm holding is 3 parts. One is project-based learning. So I'm creating an environment where children thrive. And what I mean by that is they understand what it is they're learning and there's a purpose behind it. There is no set curriculum. For over 100 years, the public school curriculum really hasn't changed. We're learning the same things, the same grades, it's just repeated year after year, generation after generation. Not much has changed other than they have switched off slowly the right brain and taken away the creative and the physical aspect of children's public education. So we've lost the creative arts and the physical education, the movement, and really children are just immobile, sitting in classrooms for 6 hours a day, learning a heavy curriculum, memorization-based strategy, which is why we have such high levels of ADHD, because our bodies aren't actually meant to sit still all day and not move. So a big part of my approach is allow children to explore what it is they want to learn instead of making them learn and follow a curriculum. So in project-based learning, for example, they have a project that they're working on together as a group, yet they are learning so many different things like math, science, history, all sorts of things, but it's relatable. They connect the learning element to the actual activity that they're learning. On top of that, they get to choose the classes that they take. So if they are highly right-brained and they really thrive in those types of classes, we offer a lot of classes like that, even metaphysical and esoteric classes. If they are highly left-brained and they actually truly enjoy that stimulation, then we'll have STEM programs where they can take robotics and learn about all sorts of technologies and really use that left brain capability to enhance it, but in a way that's safe and drives passion. The second pillar of Aramis is all about animals. So I work with children and adults. I do one-to-one healing and soul reading sessions for over a decade when I transitioned from animals to the work I do now. The horses are also guardians of the land. as well as elephants. And they kept coming to me in sessions with children and they told me, you need to incorporate animals into your learning. And I had an aha epiphany moment because I spent 20 years plus of my life working with animals in ICU, in general practice, in emergency medicine, in surgery, and at the zoo, the National Zoo. I worked there for 10 years. So when I left the animal field, I felt kind of like I've abandoned the animal kingdom, and I felt this sense of sadness, like, no, I don't want to stop working with animals, but I felt this push to work with people first, adults, which then eventually led me to working with children and then to the work I do now. So the animals were coming to me, showing me this is full circle, because now what you're going to do is take all this knowledge that you've learned and all this connection you have built, this beautiful connection with the animal kingdom, and we're going to help the future generations connect back, which is why my book title is called Healing the Human Animal Bond, because I believe that part of the 3D interference has been disconnecting and detaching us from the animal kingdom in every way possible so that we don't have the empathy for the animals and we have this structure, this hierarchical structure where we believe that we are on the top of the food chain and they are beneath us and they're not smart, they're not intelligent, they serve no purpose other than to entertain us and etc. And so I was told by the horses, the spirits of the horses, that we want to be in your schools and we want to work with the children. So I started the animal component of Aramis. The second pillar of Aramis is incorporating animals into learning. So not only will there be horses, but I have a dog that I adopted specifically. So when we open our center, we will have a on-campus Aramis therapy dog who's a golden retriever, and she's beautiful, and farm animals. And the children will incorporate learning and interact with the animals as part of their learning. It could even be we're reading outside with the horses or learning about animal science and conservation, veterinary medicine. It could be anything. Animal therapy as well. And then the third leg or the third column of Aramis is health and wellness, because I also believe that that is a huge missing link in our development. Public school, they leave out the holistic and alternative approaches. And so do medical schools. And so our doctors aren't trained. Nobody is trained. You and I just had a conversation before we recorded about certain modalities that most of the public don't even know about. And they should, because they're natural and they're ancient. Our Health and Wellness Center will introduce children from the young age of 5 years old to cupping, red light therapy, frequencies, crystals, tuning forks, and all the things that you can imagine, essential oils, salt therapy, so that they understand from a young age how to take a holistic approach to their health and wellness so that they don't reach for pharmaceuticals right away. They're not trained to use that as a crush. They learn how to self-regulate. They understand their emotions and how that contributes to their energy and what vibration means and how to create an outlets so that we can remove suppressed energy in our body and what that means and how to articulate it. So those are the three components of what I'm creating. And we are here in Florida to open the first physical location.
Wow, that's amazing. Academia has discarded Nikola Tesla, who talked about frequency and who worked with scalar energy, which academia also discards. They say it doesn't even exist. They're like, oh, torsion fields, scalar energy, non-Hertzian waves, it doesn't even exist, but this was the foundation of Tesla's work. So they discarded Tesla, they discarded basically frequency-based understanding of the universe, and then the medical schools in 1901, here in the US at least, they were literally taken over by the Rockefeller family. And so holistic medicine, which was a big part of everyday life for people, was literally shut down by one family. And so we have the present day medical system where we go in for treatment and we don't get treatment, we get sort of suppression of symptoms.
Exactly. We never get to the root cause of anything. It's just mind body. They discounted the spirit a long time ago. So we're never really getting to the root cause of dis-ease, which is the spirit. They took that out. And so now they treat symptoms. And that's how we navigate our medical system. And that's why nobody gets better. And that's why we have compounded illnesses, because all the pharmaceuticals do is they suppress one symptom and create another. And so now we're just on multiple medications, chasing after one symptom after our next, and we have never really gotten to the root cause of any of it. They discount all of that because we know they don't want us to actually be well. That's the point.
Right. So in your project, you're basically, for children, you're bringing back in what was once just a natural thing to do, which was to use natural, nature-based healing methods to keep us feeling good.
Absolutely. I can't even take credit for what I'm doing for two reasons. Number one, I believe that the educational system, I believe my purpose on this planet and why I chose to come here and my mission is to bring back ancient philosophies of not even learning, just ways of life. So there are ancient civilizations that I am aware of through my sessions over a decade of working with thousands of people where they have shown me how their civilization teaches their youth. And so I feel in a lot of ways I'm modeling what other civilizations have done, including humans, but all the way back into the time of Lemuria, for example. I know I had a lifetime in Lemuria, so I remember how we taught children in Lemuria, how the youth were treated in Lemuria, how we call in the souls in that time frame to fill roles that were needed. So a lot of times they already knew what they were coming in for to begin with. So instead of telling them what to do and making them learn a bunch of things they didn't need to learn and wasn't necessary, they just went right into their area of expertise, for example. Well, they don't want that in the current system. I feel like I'm not doing anything new. My soul is trying to recreate what we once had. The second reason is that I had two sons, one at 23 and one at 30. About a year before my daughter was born or even really thought about, she came to me as a soul and told me, we have a big job to do together. I'm coming into your life and I need your help. I didn't know what it was at the time, but of course I said, yes, I consent and I am ready to be here to be with you because she's like, this is huge. This is a huge mission. She came into my life about a year later, and throughout the time I was pregnant with her, and even before, because it took almost a year for me to get pregnant with her. So I got quite frustrated because I thought she was coming sooner. What I realized is that I was being prepared because during that time of that year, I would channel her telepathically. I have journals of information, and she explained to me the different types of children. What Dolores Cannon would have referred to back then as the third wave, which is really the fourth wave and beyond, and how these children coming into the planet have unique abilities. They're coming from different places all over the galaxies, from different universes, parallel worlds, and even higher dimensions of this planet to be part of the ascension, which I didn't even know what that was back then, the Great Awakening, things like that. And so she prepared me. When she was born a few years later, what I thought we were supposed to do together, my aha moment at that time was, oh, because her name is Aramis. I said, Aramis and I are supposed to create metaphysical centers because we're missing the spirit element in so many capacities with education, medicine. Basically, our whole reality discounts the spirituality, the spirit, the soul. And so I thought, I'm going to create metaphysical centers for children and families so that they can come in and learn about crystals and energy and healing modalities and all of these things that I was learning as an adult that I felt I should have been. Why didn't I learn this as a child? Why is this not normalized? And it wasn't until years later, right around the COVID period, where my daughter was, I want to say, I don't even remember, maybe 6 or something like that, I realized, oh, no, this is much bigger. And so I named it after her, the concept Aramis, and our nonprofit is called the Aramis Collective because I realized that her soul's mission is actually is a continuation of my soul's mission, where we're working together to create and shift the trajectory of the future of education, but using ancient techniques, if that makes sense. So it's kind of a two-part reason. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think it makes a lot of sense that you're doing this foundational thing of saying to the child, what is your gift? What is your strength? Let's work with that. Let's also ask the child, what do you want to learn? Whereas in school, the syllabus is going to take us through a whole bunch of things that most of us don't care about. In fact, we actively dislike, like algebra and a whole bunch of
Right.
other stuff that not only do we not enjoy it, and we don't see the reason for it, and that's because there literally is no application for algebra beyond the first day of learning algebra, which anybody knows instinctively anyway. You don't need a textbook to tell you the first day of algebra's teaching. There's a book by A.S. Neal, a British educator. You probably know this book, Summerhill, and he talked about his experience bringing kids in who were not succeeding in the public schools. He would bring them to this place in the country, this learning center in the country, and he would say, okay, you have the choice of doing nothing all day. You can just hang out with the horses, lie in the grass, or you can come to a class that you choose among the many classes we offer. But if you decide to come to a class, you must get there on time. You must not disrupt the class for the other kids. And here are all the rules. Other than that, you can just do nothing. And so the kids would do nothing for a week, 2 weeks, a month, 3 months. And then eventually they'd go, I think I want to learn. And they'd decide. And it was like student activated learning, he showed, was so important for children's education.
Yes, and there are many formats like that in this country for the last 50 years that have showcased something similar to that, and there's spectrums of that. So that is on the spectrum of full autonomy for the child. Get no structure. Let them choose 100%. And then you get into like the Steiner approach or the Montessori approach, where it's choices. There's choices involved, but then there's still a curriculum that needs to be followed because of the state guidelines, things like that. So where I fall is I'm a big collaborator. I love integration. I like combining things. It's all about balance to me. So I'm thinking, well, why can't we just do it all? But in a way that's a little bit more structured. So instead of inviting children into my area of learning, what I'm creating with absolutely nothing to do, they do have to choose some area, but it doesn't necessarily have to be academia. They could be like, well, I want to be in Sherri's class and I want to just hang out with the horses for a couple of hours today and work with animals. Okay, cool. You're gonna go, let's go work with the animals today. Another person says, I don't feel like doing anything today, but I'm really interested in what's in the healing and in the healing center. Can I just go play with the equipment and see, of course, with supervision. I want to learn, I want to lay on a biomat. What are these amethyst and black tourmaline crystals inside of here and how do they work? And so give them ideas so they're not just sitting there with nothing. And the idea is that you plant seeds and be like, look at all of this cool stuff. Is there anything that you're interested in? And I guarantee you that they will find themselves somewhere, but with some sort of structure. So it's more of an integrative approach, I think, like a holistic approach to learning, where the children really do get to decide, but there is structure to follow. Yet it not lacks, that's not the correct word. We do not have a curriculum. So there is no requirements. There's no tests. There's no grade levels. There's no have-tos other than the rules of boundaries, respect, following the rules, things like that. They get to choose. It's all about developing your passion.
When did you first realize that some of your children, or maybe even all of the children that you work with, had what might be called psionic powers?
Looking back, every single one has. So let me explain that. I started an animal communication business while I was at the zoo. Sidebar from the zoo, I wanted to do something else. I didn't really align with the zoos anymore. I didn't like animals in cages. I really was like, I'm not happy here anymore. Something about this didn't feel right to my soul, and I just needed to get out of the zoo. I don't like this environment anymore. So I started doing animal communication and side business of healing. And time after time, the animals were telling me that the dis-ease that they had, or the anxiety they were holding, or the issues that they were carrying were projections or mirrors of their human companions. I don't like to say pets or owners. And I was being pushed time after time to tell people, you're the one that needs help. Well, you're looking at a person who is very shy and introverted at that time, who doesn't really like people that much. I cower away from people. And so it was really hard for me, but ultimately I listened and I felt like the animal kingdom was just pushing me to work because humans are the ones that need help. Animals don't need any help. They're here to support us. At least the domesticated animals come in to help us, to support us in many ways, which is what I explained in my book. So I started working with humans in a healing capacity, just doing energy healing, and then my abilities expanded. Then I started connecting to their galactic soul families and starting to see into their past lives. And I started sharing this information with them. Well, I think through the birth of my daughter, this was divine intervention. I started to attract children who were labeled. Now, a big part of my platform is delabeling children. I do not abide by the labeling 3D labels. I do not agree with it, but sometimes I have to say it. So I attracted autistic children. And at that time, I didn't really know anything about autistic children because my children were never labeled with anything. They never really struggled with anything outside of the ordinary things. And suddenly I was attracting parents that their children were nonverbal or, severely disabled in some way. Some of them had feeding tubes, some of them were having seizures, things like that. And I would have to communicate with them telepathically. And the parents were coming to me because they wanted me to heal their child. And I'm finding out in the session with the child that I'm speaking telepathically with, I don't want to be healed. I'm this way because I have a high frequency. I am an ascended soul coming from Lyra or another universe or Arcturus or wherever they were coming from. And I'm barely holding on to this body because this body cannot hold my frequency. And these are the reasons why I'm struggling so much. These are the reasons I'm not speaking. And every child had a reason for the perceived disability that they had or a problem or the label in which they were given and medicated for. And I was like, oh my gosh, like how come more people aren't talking about this? Because at that time, there weren't very many people out there talking about alternative reasons for these labeled children. Why do they have autism? Why do we have ADHD? Why do we have dyslexia? Other than, and I'll use keywords because I don't want your channel to get taken down, other than the blame of these, pokies that we get and toxins in the environment and lead and mercury and all of these things, yes, they do contribute. But what I found is that if I'm attracting clients that have never had any of those before and have pure diets, that hypothesis can actually be true because then how are these children being labeled with these severe disabilities if they've never had one of those before? So I really was like, okay, God, please help me understand this. And so I started to attract more and more and more families. And these children that I started to attract were highly telepathic, remembering their past lives. Some of them were claiming that they could teleport. Now, there was no evidence of that, but they can control the electronics in the home. They remember past lives. They were traveling interdimensionally, and they would tell me about it. And the parents were in disbelief because they didn't know what to say to these children. How do I respond to my child who tells me that they go to Mars every night? And they would see me on a podcast talking about how I'm working with these types of children. They'd contact me and say, help me, my child is saying the same thing. They're saying they're being abducted. What do I do? And then I would connect with the child. And I'm learning after talking with thousands of children in China, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, all over Europe, the United States, South America. It's not just in the United States. I've started to compile kind of my own internal database of clients of children that had incredible abilities. And that's when I really started to focus on, okay, this is why they're being labeled. This is why they're being psychically attacked. This is why the dark side is targeting them by labeling them so that we can get the inadvertent permission from parents because they don't get what's going on to medicate them so we can suppress their vibration, suppress these abilities so that we can stop this from occurring, the dark part of the government. I realize this is much bigger. And this is a much bigger thing. And then that's when the education came to mind is, okay, we got to create a whole new education system for these children of different abilities because they're actually spiritually gifted. They're multidimensional. They're from other universes and they're capable of things beyond the spectrum of our awareness. even the scope of our, like, we can't even comprehend some of the things that they're capable of. We see it in movies and we're like, oh, that's fake. No, that's not fake. These movies are depicting real abilities, but you know how Hollywood works. They show it in a movie, they make it look like, oh, that's just a movie so that the population thinks, oh, that can't be real. When in reality, they're showing us the ability of these children.
Well, I think it's really useful what you did, which was to separate out the extremely traumatic medical or chemical assault on kids with these heavy metal containing, I call them quaxines. If they want to take my channel down for that, that's fine. I just keep talking the truth. I mean, I've been an anti-vaxxer for 30 years. I read 27 books on vaccination, on the historical science of vaccination, and it turns out there is no science of vaccination. It's fraud from beginning to end, starting with Jenner. It's just fraud. Now, most people would say, but why do all these doctors believe in it? Well, because they went to a medical school set up literally by the Rockefeller family who wanted to make some
Right?
money. It was just about making money on something. You can't make money as a doctor if someone's just eating an apple as a way to be healthy. You need to sell them a magic bullet, sort of magic medical technique that's going to save them from germs.
Yeah.
So my research led me to become a vocal anti-vaxxer. And so when people are saying, "Oh, I'm not an anti-vaxxer, but I think we should have clean vaccines," I'm like, "Well, you should be an anti-vaxxer because the literature shows, the scientific literature, epidemiology, the study of disease in populations, shows that quaccination kills people at an extraordinary rate." So it's good what you did, which was to separate children who have been medically assaulted from children who are, as you say, their souls are having a hard time aligning with the body perhaps, or they just choose to use telepathic communication instead of a more barbaric method of spoken language.
Yes, and I want to further your point because you're absolutely right, but I want to be clear that I believe that they created the quaxations or whatever you call them because they knew because everybody has an energetic signature when they come into this planet. When you go through the etherical realm to be through what I call the etherical birth portal to the womb and you are born into this planet, your soul signature leaves a print. It's just like a fingerprint on a window, you know? So there's a spiritual fingerprint. The beings that are the guardians of this planet, both good and the dark ones, know every single soul that comes through and incarnates. Therefore, through time travel, parallel realities, psychic abilities, remote viewing, and many other capacities, on top of what I just said, the dark side knew way ahead of time that children of advanced psychic and all sorts of abilities were going to start coming into this planet to be part of the ascension to help with the evolution and the great awakening, which like if you just take out the word child, it just simply ascended souls were going to come through in many waves. And I believe that they knew that that was going to happen and their main method of stopping, you can't really stop them from coming through. So how can we debilitate them? How can we cut off their abilities or turn off the switch and create dormant NPCs walking around? Well, the vaccines are number one. They're number one. That's so, but obviously they can make a lot of money with it. But also number two, sugar is the biggest threat, I believe, to our children on this planet because it works much like cocaine and it is a drug and they do go through withdrawal and it does affect the neurological system and development, especially early development. And then you have the electromagnetic frequencies and the plethora of many other toxins and the fake food, I can't think of the word, the processed food that we eat. So I believe that the children coming in with these abilities have been coming in since the Indigos. Even Dolores Cannon talked about the first wave. They've been coming in even before that. But when they started to figure out that they were going to start to come in large sums, they said, "How can we put a stop to this? How can we stop the abilities of the superpowers of these souls? Let's harm them as children. Let's start from the time they are in the womb." By vaccinating the moms, creating traumatic births, creating these narratives around the diet, and then they just go from there. And that's where we are today.
Well, I spent 11 years researching childbirth, and it turns out that hospital birth is extremely dangerous for mothers and for infants, even though it's touted as this incredibly safe, wonderful, modern thing. One of the chapters in my book was on the Hep B vaccine because they
Hmm.
oftentimes will simply take the baby without any kind of permission and vaccinate them with Hep B, and then the baby will most oftentimes go into anaphylactic shock and occasionally die, and maybe more than occasionally die. And the nurses remain quiet because they don't want to lose their job. And the doctors are like, well, we did our best to save him, but what can you do? Nature, and they put the blame on the kid and the mother for their genetics. And so
Right.
it was a really important chapter because it's so anti common sense, it's so anti health, it's so obviously just murdering children on the table on the first day of life. They're not even given a chance.
Yes. So I was a hypnobirthing practitioner. I had three traumatic births. I had three unempowered births back to back to back that I believe that my soul signed up for. So I did that on purpose in hindsight, so that I would have this thought in my mind, there has to be a better way. And after my daughter was born, I learned about something, she's my third, called hypnobirthing. And somebody told me about it and they're like, Sherri, this is something, what, how do you not know about this? You should be teaching women this because it's all about self-hypnosis, learning how to tune into your body so that you understand what's happening in your body throughout the process of the gestation periods, what happens when you go into labor, and how can you actually work with your body as opposed to against your body. And the whole time throughout your pregnancy, you should be doing techniques of meditation and self-hypnosis so that by the time you go into labor, because most cases women throughout their entire pregnancy are in fight or flight because of anxiety, stress, and horror stories from other parents, women telling them about their horrible traumatic births. It's just like this rite of passage. So they are stressed and in fight or flight their entire pregnancy. How can you possibly expect when you go into labor that you harmoniously just switch into parasympathetic mode and you have this beautiful childbirth? It's not actually possible. So most people women go into labor in complete shock and fear based mode. So they're in the sympathetic mode. They got catecholamines running through their body, and this stresses out the baby. And it actually our uterus is not part of our fight or flight organs. So what is the first thing to shut down when you're in fight or flight fear? Your uterus. And so the doctors are like, oh, there's something wrong with you. You're in delayed labor, your failure to thrive, and all of these terms that they come up with to convince women to have cesareans. Now, there's a lot of reasons for this, but going back to what I used to teach women is you need to learn to relax your body throughout your pregnancy for you and the baby so that your body is trained to not be in fight or flight. Train your body how to be in that parasympathetic, calm that vagus nerve so that when you go into labor, you can self hypnotize. There are techniques that you can do during labor that actually work with the body to help the process not only go faster, but painless or next to painless. And then we have these gentle, quick, easy, healthy births, and it's not traumatic for mom or the baby. But again, there's no money in that. And during the Roman Catholic era, they actually made it illegal to have midwives, and they made it so that you had to either birth in isolation, and then women were dying. So instead of that, they created birthing wings where they had no choice but to be birthed in a hospital where they were chloroformed before they had, different types of anesthetics through a spinal tap, through epidurals, and they would shackle women to the bed. And basically, it was their belief system that they had to yank the babies out using tools, and this caused a lot of brain damage and to the babies. So it's very barbaric, and I believe that the reason they did that is because there was no money involved and they wanted to sabotage the birth process to create fear so that in our epigenetics through generations, we have an inherited fear-based births that traumatize the baby, traumatize the mom, It's all part of cultivating this loosh system that we are in, not to mention delayed cord cutting and all of these things that they don't do that are necessary for the babies to get the optimum amount of antibodies and things like that. Most of the population has no idea what I just said and what I'm talking about because they're not taught that, because it's so normalized to be in a hospital and birth when it's completely unnecessary. But we have modified and programmed humanity in such a way that we are in such fear that we almost do need the hospital, because then we create in our own mind issues. Our heart rate goes up and we cause our own complications, preeclampsia. And a lot of these issues are created through our own mind and fears. And we have no idea that we've done that. There is so many layers. That's a whole other conversation.
Just to sum up, the hospital is a place of fear. There's no person on the planet who goes into a hospital and says, "Oh, I feel so relaxed in here. It's wonderful." It's like, no, if you want to relax, you go into nature. You don't go to a hospital. So when a woman who is in labor goes into a hospital, first of all, they bring her in through the emergency doors. It's an emergency. It's like, oh, really? I thought it was just a natural thing that women do, is to have a baby. It's an emergency. You're having a baby. Let's get ready for some wild stuff. And the woman starts to pump adrenaline. And adrenaline literally chases away oxytocin. And oxytocin is, as you know, the contractile hormone that brings the baby out. And so the mother's labor contractions stop, generally. And then the obstetrician says, well, your labor stopped. I guess I'll have to send you home. Or if you want a C-section, we can do that right now. And so it's like this circus of nonsense in the hospital. It's total nonsense in there. It's a big fiasco. So obstetricians should be heroes. They should have those rare cases where the midwife can't turn the baby if the baby's sideways in the uterus, and the midwife's unable to turn the baby for some reason to help it come out. Then the OB could be the hero. But that's like 1 in 1,000 cases. It's not like every woman should immediately just think, yeah, I need to go to the hospital to give birth.
And yes, you're absolutely right. And the reason why we have the highest rate of C-sections in the world, or one of the highest rate of C-sections in the world in this country, is going to blow people's mind. Because they want actually to bypass, so the powers that want to be, the powers that were, however you want to say it, I call them the dark players in my book, the dark ones. They know how important it is to pass through the birth portal. Well, the birth portal is the mom's womb, the birth canal. We call it the birth path in hypnobirthing. That's a very important portal. So if you go through C-section, you bypass the portal, and the baby is traumatized even more because now they have bypassed the birth portal. And they have come out through direct etherical trauma. And they do that on purpose. So they actually train in medical school to push for these C-sections. And I lived in California during a time where it boggled my mind when I was in Los Angeles after my first son was born. This was about 2007. He was a couple years old. And women, it was actually a popularized, normalized thing where you could plan your C-section, and they had C-section parties, and they actually convinced these women to have C-sections from the beginning with no reason other than, oh, it's cool, and you don't mess up your privates, and and people would have parties about it, and I'm thinking, are these people insane? Are they crazy? But they were normalizing it, and insurance companies were paying for it. I was like, this is insane.
OBs will tell women who are pregnant and looking for advice, scientific, sound advice. They'll tell them that their pelvis is too small to give birth. But there's a hormone called the relaxin hormone that comes in and relaxes the ligaments between the bones. It's not about how wide the opening is normally. It's about the fact that nature's going to take care of it. It's going to come in as you're about to give birth. The relaxin hormone is relaxing those ligaments, and the bones are literally separating. It's easy to get through that opening because the ligaments become relaxed. They're not tight like they were. The women are told, oh, we're going to have to give you a C-section. And oh, by the way, the bill is going to be X thousands of dollars for the C-section because it's actually major surgery. And then they tell the woman after major surgery, they go, oh, just go home. You're fine. And it's like, wait, what?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's like that. All of it is nonsense. The title of my book, which has never been published, is called "Spontaneous Creation: 101 Reasons Not to Have Your Baby in a Hospital." Now,
Wow.
now the last four chapters, I was so after 11 years of this, of writing it and researching, I was so uptight and literally I was going to have a nervous breakdown because of all the trauma that I saw that was unnecessary to women and babies, and I was like, oh my God. So I didn't actually finish the last four chapters. The vitamin K chapter had about 500 pages of data in it, and I was like, how do I get that down to 20 pages?
Yeah.
And I was
Yeah.
like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. So it's just sitting on my hard drive and I don't know what to do with it. But I'm with you on that. And I think that your learning is absolutely spot on as far as all of this goes. Men should stay the hell out of childbirth and let women tune in with nature, with themselves, as you said, with their own bodies, and let midwives guide them. The grandmothers of the tribe
Mhm.
became the midwives because they'd been through it. And then they helped their daughters and then they helped their granddaughters. And that's how it should be. The midwives should be the primary caregivers. So in the last few minutes that we have, let me ask you about past lives, because are the psionic abilities of the children that you work with tied to their understanding that they have past lives and that their remembering of their past lives, or is it not necessarily tied to that?
I think I think the abilities that we in with and they come in with has to do with their grand purpose of why they're here. So their abilities are going to be tied to where they come from, what they've done before, what they're capable of, and why are they needed here at this time for that purpose. And that's why not to create not to bash labels and then make new labels. But there are categories of new Earth, what I call new Earth children. Well, it's not my term, but I call them new Earth children that explain why there are waves of different types of children with unique that differ with their abilities and what they're here to do, kind of their spiritual infrastructure and capabilities come in waves for reasons, so they fall under categories. So it's not a label, it's more of a category. The children that are the souls that choose to be those children are coming from places that is normal for them. It's like that's part of their spiritual DNA. So they come in to bring that because we're missing it in this planet at this time. And so now we're seeing more in 2026, we're seeing more the psionic abilities enhanced and widespread than before. There were more categorized during periods of time that we needed it based on the time frame. Like timing is really important. Where we were in the collective awakening, people come in when the time is suitable, if that makes sense. So now we're seeing these children with these abilities that are enhanced because we're ready for the disclosure. We're ready for them to have these abilities that expand beyond our normal senses as humans, because I think it's time for that level of disclosure to occur. And our frequency of the Terran frequency of this planet has reached a point where, and I think it's the solar wave, the solar flares, I guess you could call them waves too. These flashes that keep coming through in waves are creating what I call windows or portals, however you want to call it, different ways, access points where it creates the perfect condition for some of these souls, depending on where they come from, Alpha Centauri, Andromeda, other universes, to come through with that frequency to this planet at a time where the planet is ready to receive that frequency, where 5 years ago, 1 year ago, 3 months ago, it couldn't have. And they have windows of opportunity where they can come through because the frequency is a match. It's in alignment. And now we're seeing massive amounts of widespread types of frequencies with widespread types of abilities, more than we've ever seen before, because like this is the year of movement. This is the year, I mean, 2025 was a really rough year, I think, for many people, we can all agree. But we needed that disclosure. And we're still in the year of disclosure. We don't just disclose in one year and then we're like, all right, see ya, everyone knows everything, books closed. No, we still have a lot of people that are hypnotized and not activated. So these children are continuing to come through, continuing to prove beyond the capacity and capabilities of previous generations of children to activate and awaken something dormant inside of us, inside of our human DNA, that I believe is our consciousness. So that junk DNA, the dormant DNA, is just our consciousness that's not activated. It's been locked, turned off by genetic modification, programming, AI technology throughout generations, through, like I said, through epigenetics. Now that is activating. These children are activating that quote unquote junk DNA, which is our consciousness, which lives within the cerebral spinal fluid, which is also why cerebral spinal fluid is so sought after by the dark ones, because they study it because they think they can replicate our consciousness through the cerebral spinal fluid. And that's just not the case. But they think that they can, that because that's the only liquid, living, physical evidence of our consciousness in our body lives within the cerebral spinal fluid, nowhere else. Maybe fragments or fractals of it could be in our blood, in our skin, in aspects of our DNA, but the spinal fluid is actually what holds our consciousness. That's the missing link to activate the dormant DNA. And that's what these children are doing. Does that make sense?
Well, when you're talking about dormant DNA, for people who may not know the history of humanity, just briefly, it turns out that we have not two strands, but 12 strands of DNA. 10 of those strands had the connector strands removed by nefarious entities that genetically tinkered with us in the past. So we have all 12 strands, but we don't have 12 working strands. We have two working strands. Now, somehow, even with just two working strands, which is good for a slave, if you want a slave, two strands instead of 12 is good, because if the slave has 12 strands, they're going to exit the matrix. They're going to be like,
Exactly.
they'll figure things out too fast and just be like, see you later, I'm not going to be your slave. But even with two strands, we figured out that we're in the thought control matrix, and we're all headed out. Now imagine how it's going to be for us when the power we're going to feel, the incredible joy we're going to feel when all 12 strands are working.
Exactly. Yeah. And that is why I believe that these children are coming in from way higher densities of consciousness, way higher dimensions. I'm not even just talking about the fifth. I'm talking about there are children being born that I work with that come from non-physicality. They haven't been physical for millions of incarnations. They've already ascended so far beyond that they are just light beings. And that's where we see a lot of the children that have these psionic, we'll call, abilities that are so advanced, yet they lack the ability to do the most basic human functions, like walking or talking. And that's because there's such a high frequency that they're so used to being non-physical that it's very hard for their soul to integrate into a physical body. It's almost like they're drowning or suffocating as soon as they try to push themselves into this body and integrate with this 3D vessel, two-stranded DNA vessel. It's not compatible. So that's why they have to kind of hang out outside the body and only allow a certain percentage. And I'm talking 2 to 20% at some times. I'm giving numbers that are fake right now, but just to give you an example, just to keep the body alive. Are they here to run a marathon? No. They are here to embody a physical form so their toroidal field can vibrate out a frequency that they are pulling through this body, barely keeping this body functional, so that they can re-terraform this reality. They can do grid work, they can anchor in frequencies, and most importantly, they can disrupt the 3D illusionary binders, which is the main ingredient to mind control. And you said, you hit the nail on it. That's how they control humans. If you want slaves, you control them through the mind. If they can convince us that we are not capable, that we are less than, and we have all of these other capabilities that are dormant, then we're easy to manipulate and control, which they have been doing for thousands of years. But if you bring in these souls that are like, no, I'm going to disrupt the bandwidth and the emitted frequency waves that you are giving off to manipulate these people's minds into this illusion that you're creating, which we call the matrix, then their toroidal field, if you have many of them, work together to disrupt. Next thing you know, they start to reharmonize. And that's why people are spontaneously waking up, and adults are like, wait a second. And then once you wake up, there's really no going back. I mean, it's a choice at that point.
100%. And this toroidal field that you're talking about, that we all have as human beings, and that all animals have, is known by conventional science to exist.
Mm-hmm.
They don't talk much about it. The Heart Math Institute in Colorado does talk a lot about the toroidal field and has been doing that for probably 25 years. And it's a beautiful institute that can tell a lot about the truth about what we really are. And this toroidal field, its origin is actually an ether vortex that comes in from the north. So above our heads, there's an ether vortex spinning in, and as it goes into us, it comes out into this toroidal field, and it's a continuous creation of us by the ether. So this is something that people will not learn in academia. The schools discarded the ether with Einstein in 1905 when he published his paper on special relativity. He said, we don't need an ether. He brought the ether back a number of years later in the 20s with general relativity, but it's not really the right ether. The real ether is an energetic, real field that is the creator of all things in real time, even space. So ether creates dimensionality in real time. So if we got rid of the ether in 1 second, then in 1 second there would be nothing, because there would be no space for some places. There would be no place for things to be, and there would be no things. Mm-hmm. So if people want to understand from a scientific point of view what our universe really is, what we really are, what animals are, what plants are, what the planet is, they have to understand that the ether is the key to it all, and that therefore they must stay away from academic science, because academic science will say that the ether does not even exist. It's just a void out there.
Exactly. And public schools, the same thing. I'm not trying to take down public school. I'm not trying to get run off the road by some government official, but it is a fact that in the school system, the children are very limited in what they are taught, and they are taught the narratives that they want them to know only, and that's it. And so they need to be provided an environment where you talk to a child about terraforming, they don't even know what that is. Do you realize that we live in an environment that's terraformed? And how important the ecosystem is, and on different civilizations and different worlds have different terraformed realities, and they're suitable for the ecosystem of that civilization. Like, they don't even have any concept of that, and they don't understand or understand that this 3D is terraformed with a loose system, fear-based, illusionary, low vibrational frequency. That's how this reality is terraformed to that, which is why we have so many things, interference, to keep us suppressed. Well, these high frequency beings are coming in and then activating us, and now our toroidal fields are activating, our auric fields are expanding, and now we are re-terraforming their reality. Not so much to take over the 3D, because we don't want to be in the third dimension. We're just re-terraforming our reality to harmonize our bodies so that we can upgrade and crystallize, so that we can at least get into the resonate and at the frequency of the 5th dimension. And then a whole new terraform process occurs. So there is so much more to this reality than people have any awareness of. And it starts with the education system on all levels. Like you said, not only in medical school, but law school and business school, and it all the way down.
Now, you talked about the etheric birth signature.
Well, with regard to childbirth, every soul has to go through the etherical birth portal in order to come into this dimension. We also have a spiritual divine blueprint that's a fingerprint.
Well, that all works in a resonant universe, and that's what the ether is. It's a field of resonance gradients. It's a beautiful, and to conventional science, it's a magical thing, but it's a beautiful scientific magic once people realize it. Nikola Tesla did work with the ether, and that's why they had to discard him. They relegate him to a man who was in love with a pigeon. They don't even teach anything that Tesla taught or that
Yeah.
he understood. So, my last question: human babies have the ability to learn any language. So, any baby can learn any language. They can learn two languages at once if the household is bilingual. They can learn three languages at once if the household is trilingual. So, how do you see babies or young children as far as the power potential that they have compared to adults?
Well, it's not comparable at all right now, especially with the waves of children coming in at this point. It's not even, there's no comparison. I did a video recently about how we need to stop comparing even our children academically, emotionally, maturity, in all capacities. We cannot actually come up with a median or average anymore because we have beings coming from so many different dimensions, so many planets, so many systems, so many universes that it's almost next to impossible right now to say what is normal. So it's not even possible to compare it to adults, let alone compare them to each other. It's just next to impossible. So developmental stages and what's normal, it should be like if we have an Etch-a-Sketch right now, someone needs to shake that thing and we need to start from scratch because there is no way to really compare anymore because the abilities are so drastically different. And it's changing every couple of years based on the souls that are coming in. So what was normal 5 years ago is not normal today, and what's normal a couple years from now will not be what's normal today. It's continuously evolving, and it's supposed to be like that. And that's why I don't believe in curriculum. So part of Aramis' our theme is evolutionary curriculum. It needs to be evolving and transitioning continuously. And I was actually told by a child that was nonverbal. She told me, be prepared because by the year 2030, a majority of the population at that point will have their telepathic abilities back. And then the generations to come later, it will reverse and get to the point where we're more telepathic and less verbal. So a lot of the roles that the nonverbal children are playing right now is to teach us, remind us, because we already know, to remind us how to communicate telepathically through heart-brain coherence is part of it, through opening the heart center, to communicate energetically, and to harmonize. So we know that the whole reason they created words to begin with, our language, was created nefariously to disharmonize communication. Because when you telepathically communicate, there is no misinterpretation, there is no tone misinterpretation, there's no, I can't think of the word. It's direct to direct. There's no misinterpretation. It is what it is. Here is the download. You download back to me. And there are other civilizations that speak in clicks, in tones, and in harmonies. Like the angelic realm speaks in harmonies and song. And when you have a melody like that, it's the same thing. It creates a narrative, an entire story that is downloaded from me to you, and you cannot misinterpret it. It cannot be mistaken, if that makes sense. So the whole reason they created the language to begin with is to break up the harmony, just like they changed the music to be disharmonic frequencies from harmonic frequencies like classical music to what we have today. They broke up the language of communication from musical to words so that we could separate and disharmonize and cause confusion and limit our ability and our capacity to communicate. And on top of that, they inserted spells into the words that we use so that we don't even realize that some of the words we use are invoking negative energy and spells, which is another reason why some children tell me they won't speak our language because they know that it invokes demons.
Well, Alex Collier, who's the Andromedan contactee, he said that when he is in communication with his contacts on the Andromedan mothership, it's telepathic, and they give him an entire story, not just words. It's emotions, it's colors, beautiful, beautiful colors. He's usually so enraptured by the visuals in the telepathic download that he doesn't even listen to the words. They have to repeat 2 or 3 times what they said in words because he's looking at this show of colors, and many of which he's never seen before because the colors are different in 5D. He also mentions in one of his Q&As that English was created specifically to be the language that would most enslave us.
I agree.
And that's why it's the language of business. Let's spread it all across the world.
Yep. It has the most spells invoked in it because if you look at some of the other that's why they call them love languages, Italian or Spanish, because when they speak, it's like cursive. It's like one long tone. The words just flow together. It's very beautiful. English doesn't sound like that. It's very broken up into words, and half the time we can't even think of a word there's no word I could think of that really means what I'm trying to explain to you. That's on purpose. So when you download information telepathically purely through harmonies, melodies, or intention, there's no need for words. So it's another form of what I call 3D interference. And that's why a lot of our children are teaching us to communicate the ancient way, the ancient method to empower us. And I believe that we are going to get to the point in 2030 where more and more people have the capability of speaking telepathically. Now, that doesn't mean that we're going to turn into a mute society that will no longer speak. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that we will have the ability turned on much more in an advanced capability where we will be able to bypass English, for example, and communicate on a much more profound level than we are today.
Well, I think it's really beautiful, Sherri, that you have had the will and the talent to turn your trauma, your childhood trauma, and your birthing trauma into the Aramis Learning Center project that would help other people. I mean, you could have just said, oh, I'm so depressed from my trauma, I'm going to become a drug addict, a homeless person, and then kill myself. But you chose a different path. You said, I'm going to use the trauma, the learning that I got from those experiences, which were hell, and I'm going to help others. And I think it's really beautiful. You're amazing. In the last moments, can you tell people where your soul is from?
I'm not from one place, but I will say I work with the angelic realm and Lyra.
Okay. And your own past lives, do they figure into what you're doing here today?
Absolutely. I have a lot of Lyran lifetimes, so I'm very connected to Lyrans, to cat people. And from Lyra, I came and I have many lifetimes in Lemuria. So there's a lot of Lemurian in me. I was a midwife in Lemuria, which is why I developed such a passion for childbirth. I think that's why I went through such traumatic births, to activate that knowing within me to help women have more natural childbirths. And I still coach women to this day. But it's kind of evolved onto now, how do we nourish the children? How do we protect and ignite the passion and the wisdom and the innate abilities in children? And that's kind of where I've come from. That's where I come into play today. And then I also work very closely with the angelic realm.
Well, people can find you on aramiscreativelearning.com, and they can find you on sherridivband.com. If they want a session, what kind of session can they get with you?
So the sessions that I do have transitioned over the years from energy healing to more soul reading. So really what I do is I'm kind of like soul's private investigator. So I go on a shamanic journey with a client and I look into their origin, exactly the question you just asked me. Where are you from? And I look and see what universe they're from, what planets are they connected to, what other beings have they been, what has their soul journey been, and why did they come to Earth in the first place? When did they come here? How long have they been here? What have they contributed to Earth and the ascension? And why are they here in this life? What's their purpose? And then, of course, I work a lot with families, with children with unique abilities, helping their families navigate the tremendous challenges of being extremely different in a world that's in transition period. So I work with all ages.
Because we do have an ether, even though academia tells us we don't, we have the ability to do exactly what you just said, which is to access what might be called past lives, even though they're essentially current because they're accessible right now, right?
Yes.
So all of this is possible. None of what you're saying is woo-woo. It's in fact incredibly 100% scientific. So I want people to understand that this is not some hippie nonsense. This is real scientific, practical work that you're doing. It's just that we have a university, we have an academia that discards the real science that many, many people outside of academia are performing. So Sherri, I know you have another interview to do, and so you have to go, but we really, really appreciate your time. You're amazing. I really appreciate you, and I know that a lot of people, Tyler and Aaron from Journey to Truth podcast, appreciate you. They've had you on their conferences for a long time, and a lot of people are seeing that the learning you have is really wisdom, and I appreciate your wisdom today.
Thank you so much for inviting me on. I'm humbled to be here, and I really had a great time. And it was a pleasure to have this conversation with you today. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.